Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This week, we're taking a trip back in time all the way to 1996. We had so much fun with WCW Hog Wild that we decided to do the follow-up show. It's WCW Fall Brawl 1996, and this features, in my mind, really one of the great angles and the beginning of one of the great storylines in wrestling history with the Sting
wait.
betrayal of...
I know what you're talking about. Are you talking about the conclusion of the amazing Song of Ice and Fire feud?
Yes, the epic blow-off we've been waiting for between Scott Norton and Ice Train.
We've covered their whole feud, man. Why?
I can't think of a more needless rematch in wrestling history.
Holy shit. Okay, sorry. You were saying.
I was saying the Sting walkout from WCW, the beginning of Pro Sting, the iconic storyline that first hooked me as a wrestling fan. I think this was one of the most brilliantly executed storylines in the history of professional wrestling.
I agree. We're going to have so much to talk about when we get there. Not just about the actual angle itself and how incredibly well executed it was, but also everything that surrounded it that made it for a perfect moment, everything that would go on, everything that the NWO represented. Like, there's an unbelievable amount to talk about here.
Yeah, this is, WCW's business peak is probably not till 98, but to me, this is the creative peak, is this first 6 months of the NWO are
Absolutely.
Just about unimpeachable.
When they're actually still heels.
Yeah. So, to remind everybody of where we last left off, Hog Wild 96 ended up with Hollywood Hogan defeating the Giant to win the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. He then rechristened the belt the NWO World Heavyweight Championship. Later that week, he faced Ric Flair in a Clash of the Champions special. He retained the title after a disqualification. And around this time, they announced that the main event of Fall Brawl, which had traditionally, since the inception of the pay-per-view, featured a Wargames match, would be Team WCW against Team NWO. The question was, who will represent WCW? The four Horsemen wanted to represent WCW, but Sting and Luger, convinced the Horsemen to let them be in the match. So Team WCW is Ric Flair, Art Anderson, Sting, and Lex Luger, which is about as strong a team as WCW could put forth.
Yeah, that's so like the prototype WCW tag team, and that's what makes it perfect. And especially up until like the few weeks before this show happens, there were still only 3 NWO members. So they must have thought like, all right, we got the best of WCW, the best from the 90s, the best of the entire decade going up against the NWO. We can't lose.
Yeah. And the other question hanging over things was, who else was in the NWO? They agreed to a 4-on-4 match, so there must be a fourth man, and speculation is abound. You've got all sorts of names out there. Is Bret Hart coming over? His WWF contract has expired. Could Shawn Michaels be coming over? Sure, he's the WWF champion, but close ties with Hall and Nash. Is Sean Waltman coming over? His contract has expired, and he's obviously tight with Hall and Nash. Who's going to be the next man to jump?
Obviously, Sean Waltman is going to jump. I'm glad they didn't make him the fourth man because it just would have felt like an anticlimax. It really would have.
Yeah. I've heard the original plan was he was going to show up at Hog Wild, but they held off on that because of the WWF lawsuit against WCW. The WWF successfully sued WCW for using their intellectual property with the Hall and Nash, the Razor Ramon Diesel gimmicks, and also for implying that it was the WWF invading WCW. I think everybody understands that was what the New World Order was meant to be, and that was ruled to be an unfair business practice.
Though at the same time, that's one of the stupidest things ever in wrestling history, was Vince McMahon having the gall to be like, yeah, we've never done that. We've never used a guy who got popular somewhere else and traded on his popularity. Don't look at the 80s. Those never happened.
Well, the difference is people didn't trademark gimmicks back then, and the WWF did.
That's a fair point.
Vince McMahon's always been very aggressive about protecting his intellectual property.
But that takes you into a whole tenuous thing about, can you really trademark a gimmick? Where does the gimmick stop and the actual person begin? And it's a whole bag of worms.
With Nash, I think it's kind of ridiculous to say that like he was doing anything like Diesel-ish. Like Hall, it's a much better case because he's still doing like the faux Cuban accent. He's still got the gold chain, the slick back hair. Like Scott Hall doesn't actually talk that way.
Right, and he had actually been in WCW before not being that way, so that's a pretty compelling case.
I mean, actually, I think the Diamond Stud gimmick did have a lot of similarities to Razor Ramon.
That is true, but even so, it's a fair point. So there's a lot of possibilities. Do you think that without that lawsuit having been in place, it definitely would have been one of these WWE guys?
I've heard that Waltman was going to show up at Hog Wild. Like I heard this within the last month on Tony Schiavone's podcast, and he's not usually definitive about these things, but he said like, yes, that was the plan, and they scrapped it because of the lawsuit.
What do you think about that compared to what actually happened?
I think 1, 2, 3 kids showing up at Hog Wild would have been fine. Like, I mean, instead it was just interference from the NWO, turns the tide on that. I think it's not as good as what we end up getting on the lead into this show, which I think we can talk about now, is the dirt sheets were reporting that Davey Boy Smith was coming to WCW. We've covered kind of what was going on with him in the summer of 96 when we did King of the Ring 96. He was really upset with the Diana storyline, the whole, they're making her look like a whore. She's, her and Shawn Michaels are doing the thing. So he was all ready to leave. And then apparently Vince McMahon came to him, leaned on him. We can't lose you. Offered him a bunch more money to stay. And he decided not to come over. So this kind of blew a big hole in WCW's plans because they were coming up to the 1-year anniversary of Nitro, and they wanted a big, surprise splash for the show, and that was going to be British Bulldog being the newest member of the NWO. I think Bulldog would have been an absolutely horrible fit for the NWO. And I can't say it would have ruined the storyline, but it would have made it not as good.
If you were to sit down and attempt to make a list of the people who would be the worst possible fits for the NWO, it would not take long on that list for you to get to Davey Boy Smith. A guy who can't cut a promo, who it looks super short compared to everybody else in the NWO. It's not a good fit. He's
not cool at all. Yeah. And if the NWO was anything, it was cool.
Oh, he was deep into the dad genes by this point, too.
Yeah, you're just imagining him trying to do the NWO promos, and it just doesn't fit at all.
No. Though, in fairness, the same thing could be said if they had brought Brett in at this time. He's cool in his way, but he's not NWO cool.
I've always said I don't think Brett, Hall, and Nash would not have worked. It just
no.
The third man in the NWO had to be Hogan, because the reason the NWO worked so well was they were untouchable for so long. They were booked so strong. And that never would have happened if Hogan weren't the leader. Otherwise, they would have just gotten squashed by Hogan.
Agreed. I definitely agree with that. And there's nobody who could have really replaced him. The only name of the people that you just said that really interests me is Michaels.
Shawn Michaels would have been cool.
Yeah, it's not super realistic to think that he could have been in the NWO at that point. It would have taken a whole lot of stuff to actually make that take place. But holy shit. I know that he and Hulk couldn't have coexisted, but that would have been a stable literally bigger than anything that had ever existed. Not even close. That's the top guy.
Yeah.
It's from both companies at the same time.
And he's going to be in the Tully Blanchard role. He's going to be the U.S. champion.
Right.
I think where that would have to lead is that would have to lead to him leaving and him and Hall and Nash and Waltman splitting off and forming their own thing.
It basically the creation of the Wolfpack a couple years early.
Yeah, and I think that would have been awesome. But Vince was never going to let Shawn go.
Right.
Shawn was his guy. When it came down to Brett and Shawn, he chose Shawn.
Which it's just so funny that Brett was the one who wound up going, because really Shawn so embodied this sort of NWO idea, and Brett so embodied what Vince wanted to be doing with this product. But when it came down to it, Vince chose Shawn. That's always going to be interesting to me.
It is, and we'll get into that more in a few weeks because I think we're going to want to do Survivor Series 97.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is one of those cases where desperation kind of led to something really good creatively, because instead of Davey Boy Smith joining, they shot a really hot angle with the Giant joining the NWO. And I'm not a big fan of the Giant joining the NWO, but the way they executed it was awesome. If you've never seen this, like, find this on YouTube because it's one of the best angles I've ever seen. There's a big 8-man tag match in the main event of Nitro. It's the 4 Horsemen against the Dungeon of Doom. Hall, Nash, and Hogan show up and start beating down all 8 guys. And then the Giant comes out to even the odds. But instead, he joins the NWO. And they choke slam everybody. And then they just, like, they go up to the announce desk and they smash it. And they're throwing the chairs. And they get on, like, the headsets and they start cutting promos. And I love the way they would do this. Like, the way they would just take over the show and, like, run the announcers off and get on and be like, now who's in charge? And then, like, after they cut their promo, like, the WCW guys show up again and there's another brawl and, like, they run them off and security gets in between them. Just, like, absolute craziness and, like, what made WCW great at this time.
And it's one of those things that kind of gets lost in the translation now. It's how big of a deal it was to mess with the announcers and the announce desks. Like, those were untouchable entities, really, up until this point in history. Nobody was going to go and mess with Bob Caudle and Jim Ross at the announce desk. No one was messing with Gordon Soley or Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Like, that didn't happen. For them to, like, specifically go there and show that and, like, shove Tony out of the way while he's grumbling under his breath, like, it feels like chaos.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, imagine if, like, after the Golden State Warriors won a big game on TNT, they, like, told the announcers to get the fuck out of here and, like, got on the headsets and started talking trash.
I would love that.
It would be amazing. Yeah. Draymond Green, if the NWO existed in 2017, I don't think there's any question Draymond Green would be filling the Dennis Rodman role.
Oh my God, he so would.
So, I mean, the issue here with the Giant joining is it makes no sense because the Giant got fucked out of the world title by the NWO like 2 weeks before this. And now he joins up with them. And
the other problem is he got made to look ridiculously weak in that match. Like, he got buried. I can't, we talked about that on that show, but seriously, I cannot reiterate enough. He got buried, like laid out and had to lay in the ring for 20 straight minutes buried.
Yeah, and now he's, playing second fiddle to Hogan, and the group already has Nash as their Giant. This didn't make a lot of sense to me.
It really just makes him into being just another guy, which is the one thing you can't do with a Giant, is just have him be like just some dude who's also there cracking jokes into the camera. Like, that's not, like, you're taking something that has the ability to be incredibly special and you're just wasting it. Like, that could be anybody's role. Why the Giant?
Yeah, I think he would have been a good candidate to kind of be like the guy who beats the NWO to be WCW's champion.
Right. Like, just like a little fantasy booking here, like, just have the NWO like put him out for a while and then to have him be like the guy who comes back when all looks lost. Like, that's the pop, right?
Oh, you can imagine him coming out to the stage after they like broke his arm or something and he's been gone for a couple months and now he's back and like there's going to be hell to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they also revealed that Ted DiBiase was in the NWO. He's trillionaire Ted, financing the takeover. This was like putting an onion in an ice cream sundae. This did not fit at all.
Yeah, every single moment that he's on screen with the other three, it's not working. No. Like, he's just kind of like an old guy who's also there. I'm sure they thought that having like that sort of classic millionaire, like $1 Million Man veneer on it would be cool. But it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit anymore. And the second Eric Bischoff joins, it makes him irrelevant.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's like as soon as Bischoff takes over, there's no, and like they end up just kind of he ends up managing the Steiner brothers. But I think the other thing they wanted him for was they were talking about giving the NWO their own show at this point, and I think they were going to have him do commentary, which is kind of strange because he was not a good commentator.
He was awful, as we've established on this show.
Yeah. So just this did not work out at all. Bad fit. Rick Rude was a better fit, and Rick Rude wasn't a great fit either.
Right.
So, but the interesting thing is, there was still the mystery of who was going to be the fourth man in the War Games match because the Giant had already been booked to face Randy Savage at Fall Brawl. So we still have a mysterious question of who is the fourth man in the NWO. And I also want to get into, just real quick, like, I think everybody agrees the NWO got too big, but how many people should have been in the NWO? Because I've heard Kevin Sullivan say he thought the NWO only should have been Hall, Nash, Hogan, and Waltman. And they thought like that was the perfect number of guys. But to me, if it's an invading army taking over, like it's hard for it just to be four guys, even if it's four super duper stars.
Well, here's the problem. Is it the NWO a brand or is it a stable? If it's a stable, you only need those four guys because they're never going to go up against a stable with more than four guys in it. Or if it's like the Dungeon of Doom, those are all jobbers. Who cares? You don't need more than four to be the top stable on the brand and hold everything down. However, if it's supposed to be a brand with its own TV show and its own marketing and all of that crap, it's got to be at least like 12 people? Like a bunch, right?
This was never a workable idea, and it was like something they were kicking around. Like, how does the NWO have their own show? What does that look like? Who are the faces and who are the heels? Like, who are they going to wrestle? Like, it's just
once
it was never
started,
a workable idea.
They could never figure out once it started how to separate out heels and how to make it not just be a stable anymore. Because when it started, it was just a really over heel stable. You can't take that and just turn it into a brand that encompasses a bunch of people who don't in any way embody the ideals of that stable. It doesn't make sense. That was a mistake from the get-go, no matter how Eric Bischoff tries to spin it.
Yeah, they just saw this is making so much money. How can it make more money? What if we give them their own show? I guess maybe you could like split the NWO up and like have, the NWO fight the Wolfpack or whatever on the show, but that's not enough to sustain its own TV show. I don't think there's any way to make this work.
No, I definitely don't either. And so I'm kind of inclined to agree with that 4 people thing, though I would have capped it at like 6 people. And like I was discussing with you a little bit earlier, there are some people who should have been in the NWO because they fit. And they're like, the names that I put straight out there were Konnan, who literally turned heel like a month before this, and for some reason joins the Dungeon of Doom, which could not be a worse fit for him.
Yep. Makes no sense.
So if he just joins the NWO instead, that's a great fit. And then they have access to Mexico. They have the Mexican champion. And then Masahiro Chono from Japan, who was the leader of NWO Japan, is also such a solid fit for that brand, for the idea of the NWO. And then suddenly you have NWO International. You have all the people you could possibly need.
Yeah, and I love the idea of the NWO being this global brand. Like, we're taking over everything. We're taking over American wrestling. We're taking over Japanese wrestling. We're taking over Mexican wrestling. Like, that's cool to me.
Right.
And I think, the big boss man, if they want, they made Vincent the head of security, which was a very strange role because that seems like a perfect fit for the big boss.
Yeah, boss man's right there, guys. Come on.
Yeah. And like he's a Hogan buddy and ends up joining the NWO like 6 months later.
Well, that's the question too, is they made a big show at Hog Wild of not letting Barber Beefcake into the NWO. They made a big show of not letting Hogan guys be part of the stable. I'm not really sure why. Like, I don't think that they necessarily would have been great additions to the NWO, but like, it's Hogan's stable. Like, why not?
Yeah, you could throw in like Beefcake and the Nasty Boys, like those are Hogan's guys, but they wouldn't serve a lot of. I mean, like Beefcake is just going to be in the role he was in when they eventually put him in as the disciple. He's just going to be Hogan's lackey, and like the Nasty Boys. I mean, Nash and Hall are the tag team and the tag champions, so I don't
Yeah,
really
but
see what
somebody's got to
purpose
do the
that
jobs, man. Somebody's got to
yeah.
do a job.
So, in defense of expanding the NWO, what it allowed them to do was when they were doing house shows, they could promote the NWO is going to be at the house show. And it turns out it's Vincent and Brian Adams.
Yep.
Yeah, because like Hall and Nash are not making the show in Mobile, Alabama.
And I mean, like that's probably the best argument for why we got the NWO that we got. It's just so like Hogan, Hall, and Nash could be lazy pricks who only showed up for TV.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, even with that, WCW's house shows were never really good draws. Even when business was hot, they never really did well with the house shows. Probably because none of their top stars actually worked house shows.
That does help.
Yeah. So the big famous angle on the Go Home Nitro, Lex Luger gets attacked in the parking lot by Sting, it appears. I mean, guy the same size as Sting, same hair color.
And he comes out of Hall and Nash's limo, and
this, it looks like Sting has joined the NWO, and Eric Bischoff sells this so well. He is so anguished by this. He is just screaming, "No, no!" Like, this is the ultimate blow to WCW. Like, Ric Flair might have been, a bigger star than Sting, but Flair was a bad guy and had left for the WWF. Sting is their franchise. Like, he's been the good guy this whole time. He's never left for the WWF. For him to turn is the ultimate dagger.
oh, this is like John Cena joining the Nexus for real. Like, it doesn't.
So Sting was supposed to be wrestling in Japan that week. But with technology, I mean, I can sort of see how you could get... It's hard to explain how, like, nobody called Sting to, like, ask him, what the fuck, man? Like, what happened? Right. How nobody could confirm that, oh, yeah, Sting was actually in Japan. But then again, there's no cell phones. Like, I don't even know what the time difference is in Japan. Isn't it like 12 hours?
Yeah. And I mean, he was probably in the air for most of that time. Like, you can make yourself understand what they were saying.
Like, sure, you would have called him at his house and you talked to his wife and she's like, oh, okay, he's going to call me tonight and I'll tell him to call you. But you can sort of make it work. It still seems like a stretch that, 6 days would pass without anybody talking to Sting before this show. But,
well, of course, then we get into, it's also a stretch that Lex Luger wouldn't recognize Sting instead of Jeff Farmer just because of the face paint. But, I
mean, it's out in the parking lot. It's night. He's attacking him. It looked like Sting.
It did look like Sting. I'll give him that. That one time it did.
Yeah. Not as much when he actually comes out to the ring.
We'll get to that.
So that's the setup. Getting into the show, it's September 15th, 1996, from the Lawrence Joel Veterans Coliseum in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, home of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, 11,300 in attendance, 0.65 buy rate, which is 225,000 buys, which isn't an amazing number, but it's pretty decent.
Right.
They're getting there. Like, WCW was never good at selling pay-per-views. This was always part of their problem, was even when they were kicking the WWF's ass in the ratings, the WWF always did a better job selling pay-per-views. They just knew how to build and promote them better than WCW did.
Well, a large part of that is, if you look at this show, there's only 2 matches on this that even would have been promoted even slightly, that were probably even made before the show was like an hour before it started. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This was a weird thing, WCW. They would always just they'd promote a couple big matches and the rest of it would seemingly just be put together that day. It would just be like, okay, who's here? Well, this guy wrestled this guy and this guy wrestled this guy. Whereas with the WWF, every match on a pay-per-view, they'd always shoot an angle to explain why it was happening. There would always be something there. there would be some issue to make the match matter.
Or if not, it would be noteworthy that it was just some random fucking match.
Yeah. The show opens with a surprisingly good for WCW video package of the NWO's invasion and all the chaos they're causing. WCW's production never anywhere near as good as the WBF's, but I thought this was a pretty good effort.
Yeah, it was pretty good, and I know that this is not until after like the next match, but if you want to talk about the Okerlund thing now, because that was amazing. That's maybe the best WCW video package type thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and go over that. So after the opening match, they do like a 10-minute, they bill it as like a special report by Gene Okerlund. The interesting thing here being, Okerlund's not at this pay-per-view because his contract is expired, and the expectation was he was going to leave and go back to the WWF because they hadn't agreed to terms with him. So he's there for this pre-tape, but he's not there for interviews on the show. This is cool. This is like something you'd see on like fucking 2020 or 60 Minutes.
Yeah, it's like an investigative report, and it's all very tense. And Okerlund's just like, this is where they rottenly abused and beat up. Like, it literally makes the NWO look like an invading army that cannot be stopped.
Yeah, and I don't think they ever did anything like this again, unfortunately.
Which is a shame, because more companies should do stuff like this. Like, you can blur the lines of reality in this sort of like documentary footage type stuff. Like, you don't have to actually shoot on people to make it feel real.
And wouldn't this be a perfect role for former war correspondent Michael Cole?
Yes.
Like, I would get Cole off commentary and have him do stuff like this instead.
That would be awesome. I think he would be a better, like, kind of Mean Gene than most people would give him credit for.
Yeah, this is not relevant to this show, but there's a certain shelf life for announcers, and like after 20 years, it's time for Michael Cole to not be the voice of WWE anymore.
I agree. Come on, Tom Phillips.
Unfortunately, he is our last hope, isn't he? So backing up, the opening match is Diamond Dallas Page against Chavo Guerrero, and I can't believe how good this match was.
On paper, this is the stupidest match I've ever heard of. Like, what the fuck would make anyone believe that these two could have a good match? But they do!
Yeah, heel DDP against face Chavo.
And this isn't the DDP who we would eventually get, who's like working boots DDP, maybe the best guy on the roster. His gimmick is fully formed. Like, he's still smoking the cigar with the sunglasses.
He's got so many fucking gimmicks. Like,
they're like literally chipping away his gimmicks one by one to get to the actual wrestler underneath.
Oh, and Chavo is like white meat baby face, no business being on a pay-per-view. And as far as I can recall, I don't think he has another pay-per-view match until 1998 after this.
Yeah, I guess the storyline was coming in that DDP was feuding with the entire Guerrero family.
Yeah, he had Eddie beat him for his Battle Bowl ring, and then he beat Eddie up, was what I got from it. This is this is an example of what the WWF would do better, is they would always have a video package to explain like why this match was happening and what the issue was. Right. Instead, we're getting pieces of it from our announced team. Tony Schiavone on play-by-play, Bobby Heenan is the analyst, and Dusty on color. Heenan notably less intoxicated this time.
Yes, and actually everybody's on their best behavior, and this is some of the best commentary I remember hearing from WCW at this period. This is maybe the only three-man commentary team I've ever liked, honestly.
Dusty, like in every match, will go into a monologue about Wargames, and they're amazing. Let's see, I quoted this one. I've been in many war games, and I was in one where I was airlifted out with a broken ankle. I've been stitched up. Most dangerous match. If you're going to end something or finally make a statement, this is going to be where you're going to do it. War games, right here. When that cage drops, you'll get cold chills, and if you ain't up for it, you ain't going to play. I guarantee you. This is as this match is going on.
I'm going to say, this is like, that's 6 matches away.
He does this every single match, and I don't mind because it's such a great setup for it.
It's so good. And like I love like Mike Tenay being in with like the cruiserweight matches and stuff is good, but I like Dusty more because Dusty's whole perspective on it is like a guy who's never seen a flip before. He's like, "What the fuck? Whoa!
Yeah.
How did he do that?"
It feels like he has not been to any production meetings. He has no idea what is going to happen, and he is just sitting there observing what is happening and doing running commentary on it.
And so he's like charmed and loves everything that he sees, and then Heenan just cuts it down because it's just like, yeah, well, I could do those flips.
Yeah. So Chavo is just on fire here, and DDP bumps his ass off. Just Chavo is hitting drop kicks, plunges to the floor. He beats him with a belt. He slams him into the ring, but like tons of fire from Chavo.
I've probably seen 95% of Chavo Guerrero's entire working history. I feel comfortable saying that. This might be his best match against someone who's not named Rey Mysterio. Like this is a level of babyface fire that not only have I never seen from him, but I've never seen anything even remotely like it from him.
It's just like, where was this? I mean, mostly he played a heel in his career, but the times he played a face, he never wrestled anything like this.
No, he's a garbage face. He's a garbage wrestler for much of his career. But god damn, here, I don't know why he didn't get booked more after this.
A huge flying clothesline from DDP, a diving hurricanrana from Chavo, move of the match, a monster spinning powerbomb from DDP. This looked so good.
Yeah, I wonder if in WCW, if I was in there and I was a big guy, I would have wanted to wrestle the cruiserweights every night because all of your offense looks incredible.
Oh, and then a huge pop for the Diamond Cutter. Did you notice that?
Oh yeah, like the Diamond Cutter is something that he had stumbled on. I think it was still this year, wasn't it, or was it late '95?
I think it was '96.
Yeah, and they slowly start building it, and we're just about getting to the point where like the Diamond Cutter is like the most over part of the show.
It gets but for a heel and like an undercard heel, the pop is massive when he hits it. Like you can see how this move is going to make him the world champion.
Yes.
Like I said, just a shockingly good match. Like an absolute forgotten gem.
And it's so funny because this is what's going to make DDP's name for him. Is eventually he's going to chip away all the random gimmicks and nonsense. Eventually he's going to build all his matches around the Diamond Cutter, and he's going to start having good-ass matches with literally everyone. And that's going to take him from opening match to the main event. And it only takes like a year from this point. That's the crazy thing.
He basically gets made like 6 months after this. There's a Nitro at the Superdome where Hall and Nash like inducted in the NWO, give him the shirt, and he takes it, and then he drops Hall with the Diamond Cutter, and the pop is ridiculous because he's basically the first guy to get one over on Hall and Nash.
Yeah, and like they very specifically chose him because he played such an integral role into getting Nash and Hall like to WWF and like training them up. Like literally, that was like them giving him back for being such a nice guy. It's like genuinely a heartwarming moment.
Yeah, and apparently the story is like they had been planning to do the segment for weeks and weeks, and like every week it would get cut, which is odd because DDP and Bischoff were like homies, but somebody was not into this segment happening. But finally,
Kevin Sullivan.
Yeah, exactly. But finally, they got to do it, and it's perfect in front of the huge crowd at the Superdome. Also, as an aside, I love that they would book domes for Nitros and not pay-per-views.
Yes, how brilliant is that? Like if WWE only booked like the fucking like whatever giant stadium in Dallas or whatever. It's just like, yeah, that's for Raw.
Yeah, and then our pay-per-views are going to be in Tupelo, Mississippi.
That's fucking hilarious.
Can't explain it. Also can't explain what came next. The submissions rematch between Scott Norton and Ice Train.
Oh my god.
Wasn't it a submissions match last time too?
No, it wasn't a submission match last time. It was just no holds barred, I thought.
I don't fucking remember. I don't care.
Like, what the fuck is... All right, look. If you don't know who Scott Norton and Ice Train are, I just want you to go and look at your refrigerator and then put some arms on it. And one of them's black and one of them's white, and there you go.
It just, why book two guys? And like, they're big, but they're not like giants. They're just really big, like thick, stocky guys. But they're not really mobile, and like, there's no appeal to them fighting.
Well, the best part was too is like, okay, you're going up against Scott Norton, who literally is the greatest arm wrestling champion who ever lived on this earth. Okay, what body part are you going to work on in this submission match in order to beat him?
Yeah, gotta work that arm.
Gotta work the right arm, brother. The weakest part of the body. This match is 10 minutes of arm bars.
Just
arm
garbage.
Bars.
Unwatchable garbage. Ice Train wins after Teddy Long distracts Norton. Norton gives up to a full Nelson, and it shocked me that they would beat Norton here. I guess he hadn't started his New Japan stuff yet, because once he started working in New Japan, they were no longer allowed to beat him. Like, they always had to keep him strong for Japan.
Yeah. Oh, because he was a gigantic top star in New Japan all during this era.
IWGP Heavyweight Champion, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, he was a big, big deal. Look, giant, like, white dudes from America are always going to be top heels in Japan because that just gets over. But, like, he was a special one. Like, it just resonated. His style worked there every bit as much as it did not work in America.
Yeah. Next match for the Mexican Heavyweight Championship. Konnan versus Juventud Guerrera.
No, hold on. Let's stop there. What the fuck is the Mexican Heavyweight Championship?
I think isn't he the triple? I think he's still the AAA champion here.
Then why don't they say the promotion's name?
I don't know. It's strange because they talk about AAA. They bring out Mike Tenay for commentary, and he does a great job of it. I think Mike Tenay's role in like getting the cruiserweight division over was really important because he does. I mean, he knows everything, and he does such a great job explaining like who these guys are, how like Konnan is the Hulk Hogan of Mexico, that he's the biggest box office attraction, and that's like why he's turned heel, is because he's mad that he wasn't, getting treated like a big star in WCW, and what the mask means and who these guys are related to and whether they fought before. Like, it's just endless knowledge, and this is in an era where it was not easy to do research. Like, no Wikipedia back then.
Let's say he did it the way that basically I learned all of my Japanese wrestling knowledge, and that's just watching shows and reading interviews and extrapolating based on what you can guess.
Yeah. So, like I said, Konnan's turned heel. He lost the U.S. title to Ric Flair at Bash at the Beach, and he's much better. Like, the babyface was not clicking, and he had this dumb ring gear. Now he's, adopted the, more familiar kind of Mexican gangster look. Got the baggy pants, the gold chains, that whole thing. I don't know if he's in the Dungeon of Doom yet, but if he's not, he joins soon.
He is, because Jimmy Hart's out there with him for no good reason.
That's right. Konnan in the Dungeon of Doom. I think that's just like a Kevin Sullivan liked Konnan, so he decided to put him in his stable.
But like, it's such an ill fit. Like, it's horrible. Like, why would Konnan be in the fucking Dungeon of Doom? In fact, if anybody but Kevin Sullivan had the book at this point, like, how much influence he had, because the Dungeon of Doom would never have been mentioned again by anyone.
There's no reason for the Dungeon of Doom to still exist at this point. Like, they should have just been killed off by the end. The only point of the Dungeon of Doom was to give Hogan some terrible lame heels to fight.
Yeah, and at this point, when we have a top heel stable running roughshod, why the hell do we need a heel stable with 20 people in it? Like, also there.
Yeah, this match is a fucking train wreck.
In the best possible way.
Konnan just beats the shit out of Hoovy. Like, just kind of flapjacks him over the top rope to the floor, power bombs him like 5 different times. There are so many botches in this match. Like, there are all sorts of times where they like seem to be setting up a spot and then seemingly just forget what they were going to do and kind of stand there and look at each other.
And if you ever wondered what Konnan's default move is, for if he's ever confused, it's a power bomb, because Konnan does 50 power bombs.
It like hard every time, like ring shakes each time. This is also the first match where they go from ring to ring, which I love that aspect of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, we're always going to call back to when we did the show where Brian Pillman jumps from one ring into the other, and it was super awesome. Because to this point, I still don't think that they had done a spot with it that was that cool.
No, not much. And they use it more and later in the Mysterio Super Calo match. But here we've got Hoovy springboarding between the rings.
Yeah, it's super neat. And, like, it's really the only cool thing you can do with the double rings, which I think is kind of inherently a stupid-ass concept to begin with. But it kind of works here. And, like, look, this match is fun. It's insane, but it's fun.
They're working it way too fast a pace for their conditioning. They are blown up within 5 minutes here, and the match goes over 10, probably closer to 15.
So you can tell when Konnan's blown up because, like, his whole body is just, like, limp. Like, he'll just, like, be in the corner, and he'll just be like, no, not ready for another spot. No. No, bring me some Gatorade.
Yeah, like, they repeat powerbomb, springboard heel kick multiple times. Eventually, Konnan hits Splash Mountain. Like, just a disaster of a match, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, exactly. It was a ton of fun. If you're going to have, like, a horrible spot fest nonsense, like, this was pretty funny.
Yeah. Next match, much better put together. It's Chris Benoit against Chris Jericho. The only flaw in this match is they're booking Jericho as the face and Benoit as the heel. The problem is Winston-Salem is right in the heart of Horseman country, and the entire crowd is behind Benoit. And Chris Jericho sucks as a babyface.
Here's what I can never figure out about Benoit from this period. He's in the Horsemen.
Yeah.
The Horsemen are sort of heels, but they're not because their primary focus during this whole period is fighting the NWO. Except for Benoit, who is constantly in feuds where he's the heel. Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
But he's a face against Kevin Sullivan, even though the storyline is that he stole Kevin Sullivan's wife.
Right. It's just bizarre. Like, and I understand why they put Sting and Luger in the Wargames match instead of having Benoit in there. But for this to be what Benoit's doing when the Four Horsemen are fighting the NWO, Benoit's not with them. Benoit's not, like, in their corner. Benoit's not, like, cheering them on. Benoit's here having a random-ass mid-card match against a brand-new guy.
And let's also note, throughout this show, they're talking about how Team WCW is a man down. Who's going to be the fourth man? Because Sting's not on Team WCW anymore.
Benoit's right here.
Yeah, but Benoit has this match against this, like, new guy. Like, Jericho's just debuted within the last few weeks. They've got him playing, like, white meat, like, rock and roll Chris Jericho, babyface. Absolutely sucks.
Yeah, and he's out there. The problem is they did that because they're trying to recapture what he had in Mexico, and that's what he's trying to do. And as has been proven a billion times in WCW during this period, just because you're a babyface in Mexico doesn't mean anybody in America is going to give a shit about your crappy teen idol character.
I love when he does the thing where, like, he stops, like, right by the guardrail and all the fans are supposed to reach out and touch him. And everybody's just kind of like, don't care.
Yeah, this ain't Arena Mexico, dude. No one wants to touch you.
Yeah. That said, this match is tremendous.
God, these guys, like, look, you guys have seen a Benoit Jericho match or two in your time. I feel pretty confident that everyone here has. They're good matches, man.
Oh, yeah. But I think this is one of the best. Maybe the only one that's better is probably the ladder match.
Yeah, agreed. It's funny that these two never really got more singles matches with each other because they're always sort of, like, linked together, but they just never really had that many matches.
I don't think they ever wrestled. They never wrestled again in WCW on a big stage. Like, never a pay-per-view. I'm sure they had a random Nitro match here and there, but yeah, they just ended up doing, like, Jericho ended up in the Cruiserweight division. Benoit was mostly wrestling for the TV title and just never really crossed paths for some reason. Like, imagine how good this would be later when Jericho's a shithead heel and Benoit's, like, the working man baby face.
Yes.
But they had awesome matches in the WWF, too, where Benoit was usually the heel and Jericho the face. They had great chemistry.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like, they're so linked in their personal lives and stuff like that, and it's just we got very few chances to see them like this, and we should have gotten more because, like you said, this match is fantastic.
Just all sorts of great, German suplexes, tiger suplex, super Frankensteiner from Jericho. Diving headbutt only gets 2. Jericho goes to springboard, but Benoit crotches him and pins him with a super back suplex. Just a great match. One of the best matches of the year.
And I think Jericho says in his book that this match basically saved his WCW run because all of his first matches sucked. And then like Benoit like took pity on him and was like, let's have a match.
Yeah, same way X-Pac saved him in the WWF.
Pretty much.
What is it about? It's so strange. Like, I consider Chris Jericho to be a really great wrestler, but yeah, he stunk it up at the beginning of both his WCW and WWF runs.
And New Japan, and War, and Smoky Mountain, and
I can't place what it is.
Jericho curse, man.
Yeah, and yet, 20 plus years after this, he's one of the most over guys in wrestling.
Yep. Honestly, depending on whether or not we actually saw the end of the Big Show's run, Jericho would be the only person left from this show still going.
Well, Mysterio's still going, kinda.
So, like his original knees aren't.
Yeah, he's more machine than man at this point.
Oh yeah.
Next match for the Cruiserweight title, Rey Mysterio defends against Super Callow. Can you tell us anything about Super Callow?
Here's the thing about Super Callow. Basically, Super Callow, or Callow was the name of like a hip hop group in Mexico in the mid 90s. And I just want you guys to imagine, like, just think of like any sort of pop act from the mid 90s, just off the top of your head. And just imagine if your gimmick was that you were like a member, like the wrestler version of that band. And then like, he still wrestled for years after this. How dated that shit would get so fast, right? Yeah. Like he could have been like the Menudo Kid, basically.
So to describe him, he's in like shorts and like a baseball jersey. I'm trying to think. I can't think of exactly what his shirt was.
Yeah,
and he has a mask and like a hat and sunglasses that like he's taped on because they don't fall off as he's wrestling.
Yeah, and I mean that was the style of the hip hop band that he was basically a default member of. And so
Mike Tenay tries to explain that, and Dusty is just not catching on.
Like the second Mike Tenay said hip hop, Dusty was lost.
Yeah.
But like as a wrestler, there's really nothing to say about Super Callow. He's just one of those guys from this era. He never really should have been part of this group of cruiserweights that got brought over because he's not that talented and he's not that special. But it's just one of those things where like he's here. Like there's a million of those guys during this time too. It's like, hey, it's Super Callow and El Dandy and all of these dudes. Cool, great.
Yeah, the crowd doesn't give a shit about him. I think this was his first WCW appearance and like one of his only ones that I remember.
And he's in a title match for no fucking reason.
They have a million guys who they could have Psychosis in this match, could have had Hoovy wrestle Ray, could just do another Ray Dragon match. Malenko's not booked. Like
it's not hard to get Jushin fucking Liger.
Yeah. But this is the match they go with. And it's still pretty good. Like a lot of fun stuff here. Callow with a missile drop kick out to the floor, a power bomb, a senton from the ring to the floor, a reverse super Frankensteiner, flip splash from Mysterio. Callow catches Ray coming off the top with a drop kick. Ray gets knocked from the apron into the guardrail, which is a rough-looking bump. They do a test of strength on the apron. Mysterio jumps up, springboards off the rope, and hits a Hurricane Rana off the ring apron. Callow misses a drop kick. Ray springboards from one ring to the other into a Hurricane Rana for the pin.
That was a cool spot. Like that, and it was fun because you could see the crowd behind him, like literally people jumping out of their seats when he did that. Like whoa!
This is the kind of stuff Sabu wishes he could have pulled off.
Right, and it's so smooth. And that's the thing. During this era, before Ray's knees started to give out on him, like there's nothing he couldn't do.
There's never been anybody else like him.
Like, and it's not just that he does all of these spots, because people today, like, I swear on the indie scene today, there are 50,000 people who could do this spot. Like, it's not a big deal, but like, it's the precision that he did it with. Like, everything was so smooth and perfect always.
It's like I can't ever remember him botching a move in this era.
Yeah.
And the stuff he's doing is so high degree of difficulty.
And that's why when you put him in with like Guerrero, who's like telling the story for him, like that's why those matches are so unbelievable. Is like they're perfect. Like these are two perfect wrestlers doing their job.
Yeah. So kind of a better match than you would expect, given that Callow is a nobody thrown into this match.
And he'd be a nobody after this match too.
Yeah. Next up for the World Tag Team Championship, we've got the Harlem Heat defending against the Nasty Boys. There was some clubbering going on in this one.
I swear every time we watch a Harlem Heat match, all I can think is like the Harlem Heat were good, right? Like we accept that they were a good tag team.
I never enjoyed their matches.
I'm about to say, like everybody always told me during this era that Harlem Heat were cool and awesome.
Booker T was good.
Yeah, but then you go and watch these matches, and they're all just these 25-minute slugfests.
That's the thing, is I don't know why this is like a 20-minute match, and I have no idea why.
Like, of all the matches on this show, why the fuck it seemed like every WCW pay-per-view would just give their one tag match an obscene amount of time.
Yeah, and this isn't a bad match. It's about as good as it could be, given the participants. It's physical, it's hard-hitting, the Nasties are really over his faces. Harlem Heat have a lot of heat. There's some fun shenanigans with Sherry and Robert Parker in Harlem Heat's corner, but just an overly long match.
Yes.
And
overly long.
Easily could have cut 10 minutes out of this and just done another match with any of the multitude of talented wrestlers that are on this roster.
Yeah, and that always kind of freaked me out about WCW in general. It's like, think of all the guys who aren't on this show, who aren't on any of their pay-per-views, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, we're talking about a roster of 100 people, probably 50 of which are amazing.
Fit Finlay, Dave Taylor, Steve Regal, like...
These guys couldn't even get the time of day.
Yuji Nagata.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, like, it's just... It's I can't imagine. I mean, it would be great to have so much talent available, but like you can't give everybody stuff to do. It's just not possible.
Right. And that's why you don't just stockpile talent. And that's one of the problems that WWE goes through from time to time is like you get so many guys that like you couldn't possibly come up with storylines and purposes for all of them. You just can't.
That's how you end up with, Finn Balor feuding with Elias Sampson.
Right. Like at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to get them on the card, but that doesn't mean that you have something for them to do.
Yeah. Harlem Heat retain the belts after Sherry interferes and uses the cane. I'll defend this match. I actually thought it was pretty good.
It was pretty good. It was a welcome sight to see Sherry weirdly in like cowboy chaps with tights underneath, like wrestling tights.
I don't know what was going on. I don't know what was going on here. And like her and Harlem Heat and Robert Parker are a strange combination, but I enjoy it.
And there is a moment where they're like, go to our website or something like that. And
WCWWrestling.com.
Yes, and it's just the four of them in the back just abusing some poor intern, telling him to type stuff. That's some good comedy.
I always loved the cutaways to the internet room on the pay-per-views in this era.
Oh my God! Obviously, the most famous one is Shawn Michaels
trying to type.
He's a genius, just a sarcastic asshole.
We go backstage where Mike Tenay interviews Randy Savage. He's fired up for his match against the Giant, and he's got Hogan at Halloween Havoc next month.
And his neck muscles are doing things that necks aren't supposed to do. Like he's that level of fired up where like his like neck is like expanding and contracting like it's another set of lungs. It was weird.
So the Giant comes out here and they initially play like the Dungeon of Doom music. After about 30 seconds, they switch over to the NWO music, and I'm pretty sure they just queued up the wrong music.
And it was super awkward because even like Shivani was like, that's a little bit odd, him coming out to the Dungeon of Doom music.
Yeah, with like the green lighting and the laugh and all that.
I would love it if that was just Sullivan being like, hey, make him think he's in the Dungeon of Doom.
This is a dumb match to me. These guys should not be fighting here because neither guy should be taking a loss, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Especially the Giant just turned and he just joined the NWO. And at the same time, he's the Giant. Like, you should still be protecting him because that's still a thing. Like, not even a full month before this, the Giant was the most, like, indestructible member of the roster. He was dominant. He was going to kill Hogan. You can't job him to Savage, but yet Savage is still, like, one of, like, the last true hopes of WCW. Was this match for, like, the advantage in the Wargames match or not? Because I couldn't tell.
No, I don't think so, but we'll get into the nonsense stipulations in a second.
Okay.
Because something's on the line in the Wargames match. It just isn't clear what.
Yeah.
And Savage shouldn't get beat here because he's got a world title match against Hogan the next month.
Yep.
At a pay-per-view that's literally built around him because it's called Slim Jim's Halloween Havoc.
Did you see the kid in the front row who handed him like a bouquet of Slim Jims?
Yes.
That was awesome.
So we've got scumbag NWO referee Nick Patrick officiating this one. Macho's beating up Giant, hits him with a big bulldog. He slams him to a monster pop and goes up, hits the flying elbow, but Hogan shows up for the distraction. Macho goes after Hogan. Hall shows up. Savage manages to take out Hall, but Nash hits him with a chair. Nick Patrick manages to see none of this. Outsiders throw Savage into the ring and Giant pins him. I thought Savage was great here. Like this, this match shouldn't have happened, but I loved the way Savage was just a madman here.
Savage put over Giant here more than I think I ever saw him be put over in WCW. Like, he's treating him like a massive threat, but that he's just going to summon up the pluck to take on. You know what I mean? Like, he's so fired up and he's like hitting him to keep him out of the ring. And he's like trying to get him and everything. He treats him like a giant because he knows how to wrestle a giant.
Yeah. This was something that was missing from WCW before Hogan and Savage showed up. Like, there's these matches where Sting wrestles Vader and he'll just slam him like 2 minutes into the match. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. You have to build to that.
Yeah, and then in come Hogan and Savage, and they're like, no, kids. Yeah. We know how to wrestle the Giant.
Like, even when Hogan would wrestle, like, the big boss man who wasn't all that big, it would still be like, can he slam him? I don't think he can slam him. We've seen him slam him 15 times before. No, he hurt his back. You can't get him up.
And that's the genius. Savage is really on fire during this era.
He's
like,
great.
Even when he turns heels, like, he makes Page
PPV.
like in their feud. Like, he makes him.
And before the NWO showed up, they did a great storyline where Flair stole Elizabeth from him, and like it just drove him to insanity. So he's attacking Flair, he's beating up referees. So they do like the best old school Carney promotion tactic ever. They say Savage is banned from TV, but he's still wrestling on the house shows. So coming to a town near you, banned from TV, Randy Savage gets his hands on Ric Flair.
And it's literally the best house show business they ever did.
Yeah, it's like the only time WCW house shows actually drew.
But if I saw that, I would go. Like, there would be no question. Like, that's genius.
Yeah, it's never been done since, as far as I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great idea. And, like, total testament to Savage. It is weird not having him in the main event. And I'm sure, like, in retrospect, that they didn't want him to get beat like that. But, I mean, we'll get there. But
I mean, he gets beat in this match, and he gets beat plenty later on. So they weren't too worried about protecting him. So we go backstage where Flair, Arn, and Luger are being interviewed by Tenay. Tenay asks, who's the fourth man going to be? Flair doesn't answer and just starts being like, I hear the ambulances. They're coming down the road. They're coming to the arena. Great promo. No answer on who the fourth man is going to be. And turns out there is no fourth man for WCW. This makes no sense.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, you can believe that three baby faces would be like, no, we can do this. We got this. But, like, the entire locker room would want to be part of this match, right?
Yeah, like, anybody could be their fourth man. Doesn't really matter who it is. Could be Benoit, could be Mongo, could be Savage, even though he just got tuned up. Yeah.
And I know that this is one of those things that you're not supposed to think about, but how exactly did they sign to a match that Sting was a part of without knowing it? Like, it doesn't make sense.
No, there's lots of logical holes here. Sting comes in now and he pleads his innocence. Luger isn't having any of this. He says he saw Sting's eyes when he attacked him in the parking lot, and Sting is upset and he storms out.
And this is another really great piece to this storyline, because Sting doesn't come from off screen and kind of face the camera the way everybody does in every wrestling angle. He literally comes from behind the camera, walks straight up and talks to Luger. You're just looking at the back of his head, because this isn't about wrestling. Like, it makes it little touches like that, like, kind of throw you off, because they're not what you're
more
used
authentic.
to.
Yeah,
yes.
They're not. It's not a perfectly like blocked shot.
And yeah, it's really effective, and Sting storms off, and it's on. And these guys are going to go get murdered. It's very obvious they're going to get killed.
Oh, it's the charge of the Light Brigade.
Yes.
So we've got our Wargames match. We've got 3 members of Team WCW and apparently 4 members of Team NWO. Arn and Hall start the match. And this is like Arn Anderson's finest moment. He is so good here.
And it's so funny because he's like the least credible member of this team, obviously.
Yeah.
And like, you might almost be like, why exactly is he in here? But like, he's such a plucky, wily bastard in this. Like, every bit of the enforcer Arn Anderson is on display.
And he's been in every Wargames match.
Yes.
Like, everybody knows, and they're in Horsemen country. So, like, he's as over as Savage would have been here, because it's Horsemen country. And he just beats the shit out of Scott Hall here.
And even when Nash comes in, he's beating the shit out of both of them for a good long while.
I love that, Arn Anderson manages to take them both at the same time. Crowd is just rabid for this. Luger comes in to even the odds. Crowd is on fire for Luger, too. This was the only time Lex Luger ever got over as a babyface.
It's so funny because he got over as a babyface basically on the back of being Sting's best friend, right? We could never trust him before, but God damn it, see, Sting's best friend will trust him now. And he sort of felt like a piece of that old NWA. You know what I mean? Like, he even though he really wasn't, and he abandoned it in the end, like, now when you look at this match, it's just like, look, arrayed in front of you is the NWA, like the bedrock of WCW. And Lex Luger, like it or not, is a part of that.
Yeah. Hogan is the third man in. He gets jumped by Arn and Luger, and, like, this is the biggest pop of the night. Crowd is just crazy for Hogan getting beat down. Hall and Nash bail him out, and now it's 3-on-2. Crowd deafening "We Want Flair" chant. Flair is out next. Again, now this is the biggest pop of the night. Flair's got knucks. He's hitting low blows. He's just on fire.
And it's so great because Ric Flair's he's the smallest guy in this match. But his personality here is like 10 feet tall. Yeah. And he's doing all the dirtiest stuff. And he and Hogan are trying to out-dirty each other. And it's just great. The whole thing at this point is such like a feel-good, like, oh my God. It's just so cathartic to see a match this over. Like, everything they do gets like an explosion from the crowd.
Yeah. Commentary's great, too. Dusty's going crazy. Heenan's like, no, go for Hogan. Take out Hogan. Shabani's going nuts, like, absolutely tremendous.
So cool.
And then the fourth man out is Sting for the NWO. I don't think the crowd bought that this was Sting. I think they had figured out what was going on here.
Well, he doesn't. Here's the problem. Anybody can be made up to look like Sting. Sting just had brown hair and he's pretty athletic and he's about 6'3".
Yeah.
Like, it's not hard to find a guy who looks like that. The problem is, physically, Sting has a ridiculous amount of charisma just in every movement that he makes, right? The Stinger Splash is not a cool move, except when Sting does it. Like, all of Sting's mannerisms are just kind of lame and wonky, unless it's Sting doing them. So when you have a guy with no charisma doing Sting stuff, it's just like, that's fucking wrong.
Yeah.
It just looks wrong.
Yeah. So the heels dominate. It's 4-on-3. WCW's getting destroyed. Crowd is chanting for Sting. Just as all hope is lost, the real Sting shows up. And he fucking cleans house.
Like, we cannot communicate to you the level of ass kicking that Sting puts on the NWO here.
Yeah.
We're talking about the most dominant stable in wrestling history. Sting single-handedly destroys them. Like, if he had stayed, that's it. Like, they win. Like, it's very clear that, like, Sting was all they needed to win this match.
But the big thing is, no one from Team WCW helps him. They just stand there and watch, and like they still are like, they still don't buy it. They're still wondering, like, what if he's actually on their side and they just use the fake Sting to mess with us?
And then comes the genius moment, the moment that would launch unbelievable business for WCW. When Luger looks at Sting and he's just like, are you with us or not?
Fucking Lex Luger fucked everything up.
And then Sting, like, just goes, is that good enough for you? Because he has literally laid out the entire NWO, like, handed it to them on a platter.
Yeah.
And then he fucking says, up yours to Luger, and leaves. Yeah. And it's such an unfathomable thing that Sting would do that at this point with the character that he has. He's such a squeaky clean babyface. He has no edge to him whatsoever. And here he's walked out on this match because they've betrayed him.
Yeah, and this sets up what will be one of the great money-drawing storylines in wrestling history. Sting will not wrestle another match until Starrcade 1997. He's not injured. He just doesn't wrestle for over a year to set up this big match.
Absolutely unheard of. Like, you're talking about your top babyface is out of action on purpose for like a year and a bit. Yeah. That's fucking ridiculous.
And at the peak of a ratings war, they hold it off and hold it off and hold it off.
And it's genius because if they had paid it off a moment sooner, it wouldn't have worked as well. Like, they literally did the exact right thing. And that's that may be the only time you can ever say that, not just about WCW, but about any wrestling promotion. Like, they literally got it right.
So bad. I mean, over a year of build to Sting and Hogan, and people were rabid for it. The next night, they would have been crazy for Sting against Hogan. Instead, they make him wait for a year.
And just kind of think about this, because this is what they had to navigate. You have to make Sting still likable, even though he just abandoned the good guys. And the good guys, let's not beat around the bush. The NWO proceeds to beat 10 pounds of shit out of everybody in the ring. It is a 20-minute demolishing of all the top stars of WCW. Like, it goes on and on and on, and it's brutal and humiliating. And like they have, yeah, go ahead.
Well, just to explain what happens here, Sting walks out. It's 4-on-3. The NWO just kills WCW. They're pounding him against the cage. I don't know if anybody bled. Like, that was a big no-no at the time. So the lack of blood is kind of strange. But eventually, fake Sting puts Luger in the Scorpion Deathlock, and Hogan puts him in what could generously be called a guillotine, but was really more of just a front-face lock.
But really, he's just laying on him.
Luger gives up, and the NWO wins. Loved this match. This is great storytelling here.
Oh, it's perfect. Like, this is as good as you can possibly do with stable warfare. And then, like, and then at the end, like, literally, Luger's, like, carted off. He's going to the hospital. Like, Flair and Arn are completely demolished. Like the NWO annihilates everything WCW, because this is basically presented as, like, the last gasp hope to stop them. And they fail. They lose.
The announcers are despondent. They're just like, what are we going to do? Oh, we forgot to talk about the stipulations for this match.
Oh, yeah.
So something was on the line here, but I don't know what. They just kind of vaguely talked about, like, the NWO's made all these demands. They want their own tag titles. They want a private jet. They want their own WCW show. And it's kind of like, oh, well, if we beat them here, they won't be able to demand any of those things. But if we lose, oh boy, I don't know what's going to happen.
It's so vague that it's like that could literally be anything.
It seems clear that, like, this is something Hogan came up with, and they were just like, okay, we'll throw that in too.
And I mean, it makes sense if, like, Bischoff at this time is probably thinking, like, okay, this has so many legs, all these branding opportunities. What can we do? Let's leave the door open for expansion in this way. But it doesn't really need that added to it.
No, and, like, yeah, at this stage, there's no need for there to be any stipulation in this match. It's a huge deal to have WCW against NWO in Wargames. That's all the draw you need. And especially if you're going to have the stipulations be just, like, blamed and kind of make no sense and be vague and have no actual, like, repercussions.
Agreed. But even with all of the stuff we're talking about, we haven't even gotten to what you would have to consider to be, like, the main event angle yet.
God, this goes for, like, another 20 minutes. I just, like, kept looking at the clock being like, this is still going? So they keep beating up the Horsemen. Savage comes out to even the odds, but then the Giant shows up. So now the NWO beat the crap out of Savage. Miss Elizabeth shows up. She hasn't really been around lately. She had turned on Savage and joined up with Ric Flair, but, like, hadn't really been on TV much recently. She shows up and, like, begs for mercy for Savage. This kind of, breaks their previous storyline, but it's just sort of like feels like they've just sort of hit the reset button on all the storylines that were going on.
And it's just one of those things that no matter what the storyline was, a fan would accept. Like, yeah, of course, Elizabeth and Savage together. Like, that's just, no matter what the storyline was before, you get that.
Liz and Savage both get spray painted. Hogan gets on the mic and shits on Liz and Savage for breaking their wedding vows. Yeah, like, not cool.
Like, the Giant does some stand-up. Yeah, the Giant does some stand-up comedy whenever the camera's near him.
Oh, God. He was not a good talker back then.
No.
They sort of managed to do the whether you like it or whether you don't, it's the best thing going. Sort of.
The thing that I want to, like, really crystallize in your mind as you hear us talking about this show is that there's a lot of awesome wrestling angles throughout history, and there are going to be a lot of awesome ones in the future. I've never, ever, ever seen such a demonstrative case of the heels winning. Not just winning a little, but completely winning. Like, demolishing their opponents to the extent that it's hard to believe that they'll ever be able to rise and challenge them again. Demolishing them to the extent that the announcers lose all hope and believe that they've been vanquished forever and now they're under the thumb of the evil stable. Like, at the end of this pay-per-view, it feels hopeless. But not in the kind of way where, like, well, fuck it, who cares anymore? But, like, in the way of, like, where's the hero that's going to save us from this? But the NWO looks so amazingly powerful and dominant. I can't even express to you how much I've never seen anything like this before. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's just a soul-crushing defeat for WCW. Like, they beat up all of their top stars. They've turned Sting against WCW and WCW against Sting. and then they go to the announce booth, they run the announcers off, they get on the headsets, they talk some more trash, and then they smash the announce desk.
It's just such a visual of power. And man, like that's like when we were going into this, I was excited because this is one of my favorite storylines in history. But watching it again, it's even better than I remembered. Like all of the Sting stuff, all of the Luger stuff, all of the Hogan and the Savage, and everyone is such an integral part of this, and it just stitches together into this amazing creative achievement. And like it's gonna keep on being great. But honestly, creatively, it might be all downhill from this moment.
I think this was pretty much the peak. Like, in terms of just the creativity and the stuff they were doing, I don't think it was ever quite this good again.
I agree.
It just, it got more and more muddled as like Hogan started getting more and more involved in the creative, and then Piper shows up and Piper wants to do his stuff, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And yeah, it's in a lot of ways downhill from here. But
yeah.
I mean,
they all start getting cheered, and that fucks it up.
They ride the momentum from this couple weeks for 2 years, over 2 years.
Yeah.
A great show overall. I think this is a top 10 or top 5 all-time WCW pay-per-view.
Yeah, and this might be like a top 5, top 10 main event that I've ever seen in wrestling. Like that's how much I love it.
It's such a perfectly executed storyline.
Absolutely.
I don't think I would have changed anything about how this main event went down. Maybe I would have had WCW actually have like a fourth man, but not that big a deal.
I would have had the person portraying fake Sting actually be talented, but beggars can't be choosers.
A guy who looks like Sting and is actually talented is hard to find.
I guess. What's the Black Scorpion doing? Get him in here.
Yeah, they can't use Barry Windham from Halloween Havoc 1990, unfortunately. Wait, why is Sting 6'8" all of a sudden?
Oh my god.
So I think people kind of know what happened from here, but the next night on Nitro, Sting cut the great promo where he has his back to the camera the whole time and, says he's done with WCW, he's a free agent, he's out of here. That kicks off the Crow Sting storyline, which we'll cover much more. We'll do more WCW shows from this era in the future. This is all built into the Starrcade '97 match against Hogan, which was the biggest pay-per-view in WCW history, the biggest pay-per-view in wrestling history to that point. The other thing that happened the next night was Sean Waltman debuted as Six-Pac as the newest member of the NWO. The NWO just kept growing in power.
So good, man. And I'm so looking forward to going back and watching a bunch more of these shows and kind of covering this again. Because this is the period of WCW that I'm actually familiar with, because how can you not be? I've watched every single Nitro from right around this period all the way to Starrcade '97, because like if you're going to watch one period of television from one company, like you could maybe not do better than that year in this one.
Yeah, Nitro is so fun from back then. You get so many great wrestlers, like such weird combinations of wrestlers. Like, tonight they had Fit Finlay wrestle Psychosis.
Sure, why not?
And then like all of these huge stars and these super hot storylines, these huge crowds going crazy for everything. It was a magical, special time.
Hell yeah.
Ooh, so I think that pretty much wraps us up for Fall Brawl 96, right?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say.
I think we've sung enough praises. So this was a good one, and we've got something very different next week, because next week we've got Bad Blood. It used to be Mad Love, but take a look what you've done.
Okay, buddy. Okay.
We're going to cover Bad Blood 97, a crazy, crazy important historical show. The debut of Kane, the first Hell in a Cell match, the death of Brian Pillman, the Nation of Domination, all sorts of interesting things going on in 1997.
And most importantly, as always, Max Mini and the Midgets.
Oh, yeah. And a 30-minute flag match.
Oh, my God. No.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, you want to talk about disrespecting the American flag? That match disrespects the American flag.
Yes, contested with known American hero Vader.
And Davey Boy Smith, instead of being in Davey Boy Smith as he's on the apron in that match, is thinking, well, fuck me, I could be in the NWO right now. Instead, I came back for this bullshit.
Holy shit.
So we'll have the good, the bad, and plenty of ugly from Bad Blood 97 next week.
Good times.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you again next week.